Okay, everyone, I want to show you how I use a Google Sheets add-on to turn my student SAQ essays from Google Forms into a Google Doc you can print off or a PDF form. So basically the point of it is they're creating these essays, they're very short essays here in Google Forms to, cut down on paper and, transmitting papers back and forth with germs and whatnot, as much as I can. So while still being an AP course, but they have their questions here. So they have an A that they have to respond to here, a B, and then a C here. And then this is on Google Forms. Now, I use Timer Proctor as an add-on in Google Forms that times them individually on their own and will close out when they've hit the 14-minute mark. That's something separate, but it's called Timer Proctor, and it's an add-on here in Google Forms. So I'm going to show you how to go through this. It's basically a 3-step process. Google Forms, then Google Sheets, and you run the add-on in Google Sheets called Autocrat in Google Sheets to generate a template or printouts that make it a lot easier to grade, because grading an essay in Google Sheets is a pain and not something you really want to do, or at least I don't want to do. So my students have already responded, so I've got 22 responses here. Now, before you do any of this, of course, you can go ahead and issue the quiz or whatever in Google Forms, but you're going to need a template in Google Docs that you want your printouts to essentially look like. So mine is right here. So it says SAQ rubric. Everything in these little arrows, I call them carrots. Everything in these little carrots here is pulling from your Google form. So name, class period. Okay, so over here in your Google form, name, class period. Okay, and then I also want it to pull their responses. So right here in these little carrots is this, based on the quotation above, explain the appeal of Islam to potential converts. And that is right here. Okay. And then here for B, and then here for C. I want all those responses in this when it generates. So here is the response for their B, and then their response for C. And I went ahead and put the prompts up here as well, so that when I go to grade, I have the prompt in front of me and I'm not having to flip back and forth trying to look at the prompt and then look at their response and then look at the prompt and then look at their response. So everything is right here in front of me. This one did have a stimulus, but it was a picture and I didn't want it to take up too much space. So I just made it a QR code, and you'll see why here in just a second. It's mainly for the students, but I know what the stimulus looks like. That's what is right here, this stimulus. And I didn't want it to take up too much space on my template, so I just turned it into a QR code. And then part A gets a rubric, part B gets a rubric, and then part C gets a rubric. And this is for me to fill in once it generates these printouts. And then, of course, the grading scale, their total score. And then the reason that I have this QR code is because I want students to be able to do corrections on these and turn them back in. Last year, it was a completely separate form that they'd have to turn into me, and it ended up being like 3 separate pieces of paper, one with their original response. Then the second page was my rubric that I gave back to them that was graded, and then they'd turn in the corrections form. So essentially, they were having to turn in like 3 pieces of paper to me per student for corrections, which is a lot. And they would lose them too. So what I decided to do was they'll get this back when it generates. It'll have their name, their class period, their responses here. And then on the back, it will have the corrections form already with it. So they'll be able to turn this in. They'll get this back graded right here. This will be done. They'll get that back graded, and you can do that either digitally or on paper. And then they'll decide if they want to do corrections. And if they want to do corrections, it's already on the back side of their paper. So it's right here. So they'll fill this in, turn it back into me, either digitally or on paper again. And I have remote learners. So I'll issue these back to them graded, and I'll just go up here and share their particular Google Doc. So it'll have their name up here. You'll see in a second. And I'll just share that with them. So this is your template, and you can create it however you want. Just know that anything within these little carrots is what your Google form or Autocrat is going to pull from. Okay, so this is my template. So let's go ahead and run this. So I'm going to click on responses because this is done. Click on view responses in Sheets. Okay, so here's all my responses. And now I'm going to click on add-ons. I have to give it a second. There we go. And if you don't already have Autocrat, you'll just have to click here, manage add-ons, and then just add it. So I'm going to launch it. Okay. So I'm going to click new job, and I'm going to call it SAQ1 because it's their first full one. Now here's your templates, and then you can go find it in your drive. Mine's already in here because I already recently used it. So I'm going to click use. Okay, next. Now this is where you're telling Autocrat what to pull from. Okay, so name, it's finding these up here in your sheets. So it's asking you to map your data to the template. So all you really need to mess with here is name. So I'm going to click the drop-down box, name first and last, class period. So here's their first prompt, which is A, second prompt, B, and then C. And then hit next. That's all I really mess with. So I do this with their name, and you have to type it in exactly from up here in your Google Sheet. So it'll just generate your file name with their student name, which is just what I prefer. You may prefer it using some other file name, but that's just what I prefer. So I'm going to put that there. Now, you can choose Google Docs or PDF. Knowing that I have remote learners and I'm going to have to give their rubrics back digitally, I would normally go with PDF because I would just print them out and do it that way. But because I have remote learners as well, I'm just going to select Google Docs, and then I'm going to do multiple output mode. Now, this is going to create a separate file for each individual student right here. Okay. And that's best if you want to issue things digitally. However, if you wanted to do single output mode, that would be if you know that you just want to straight print. That way you're not having to click on each individual file and then print, and then click on that file and print, and then click on that file and print. So single output mode is usually what I did, and I would make it a PDF. And then of course you'd want page breaks between data rows. But because I have remote learners and need to issue things digitally, it's just easier for me to Google Docs with a multiple output mode so that I have each individual file. And then I'm going to hit next. I have my folder chosen already, so it's going to go into fourth period here because it's fourth period. Hit next. I don't mess with any of this, so I just hit next. Don't mess with that. Next. No, I'm just going to leave that. Don't mess with any of this. Hit save. And then you run it. Okay, so this is going to take a second, but I want to show you what this would end up looking like. So it knows 22 rows are going to be merged. It even gives you a nifty link up here to click on when all is said and done. I don't really reference this too much, but I'm sure that it would be really easy to use if I needed to go back. Okay, so it's already running. So what I'm going to do is show you what they look like. So we're going to go find them. So you can click on fourth period. So this is where it's putting all of them. Okay, so remember the template looked like this. Okay, so name, class period, prompt, prompt, prompt. So in here, let's go open, who do we want? Let's do Holly. Okay, she is one of my in-person learners, so I'm probably going to print hers off just because I grade best and quickest when it's on paper. That's just me. So notice how it put her name in here, her class period, and here is all of her responses, A, B, and C, with a rubric underneath each. So fantastic. Like, I love this. And then the corrections form on the back. So all I'm going to do is click print. Okay, double-sided, hit print, and there's hers, printed and ready for me to grade. Now, I do have some online learners. One of them is right here. So when I go to grade hers, what I'm going to do is once I'm ready for her to see her feedback, which probably won't be until next week, because I want to make sure that everyone has had a chance to do this before I start sending this to students, because of course, that's an easy way to cheat. And mine are still doing these today. So I don't want any student to have them before everyone's been able to take it. So when I get ready to let her see this, I'm just going to hit share. And I would honestly, so I'll grade it and probably just grade it and not share it with them yet. And then when I am ready for them to see their feedback, I'll just come up here and then share that with her and just do it as a viewer. So that's issuing it digitally. And of course, you could do that for all of them. It's just that I grade best on paper. So I think it's still running. Nope, it's done. Okay. So now you have merge doc URL right here, the link with their file name, and that's it. That's how you use that. I know a lot of teachers use this for lesson planning and whatnot as well. Same concept. If you have any questions, let me know.